topics the scriptures address more than anything else is end-time prophecy. So much of the Old Testament covers that, and then you get into the New Testament, and then you get into the book of Revelation, just end-time prophecy. A lot of things, and it's not just covering the last day, but the last days, and then of course what's going to happen. And a lot of the scriptures talk about things that we as God's people will have to deal with as we are heading towards the end time. Now, a lot of these things, they will be in the last days, the period that we are presently in. And then, of course, some things that will specifically happen in the last day, when everything's going to be judged, when everything's going to be wrapped up, when everything is going to come to an end. Now, as we're approaching that end, things intensify. That's one of the things that we see, is things going to intensify more and more. And one thing that I want to do is just do some messages on things that we will face as we are approaching the end of times. As we are approaching the time, what God calls the last day, when everything is going to come to a halt, when everything's going to run into the presence of God, when God's going to judge everything, wrap everything up, establish, or put everything, divide everything, good and evil, everything. I mean, everything's going to come to an end. And so, what I want to do in this message is talk about authorities or people that will take charge. In other words, one of the things that we struggle much about is as we are under government, under authorities, under people in charge, and a lot of things are contradicting God. And what are we facing? How are we supposed to approach that? And so I'm not going to speak specifically about government, but I'm going to speak about people in charge, like that may be government, that may be an institution or an organization or a community or somewhere, and we're facing things in people within us. There's that, especially as God's people, there's that warrior that rises up, and we want to take things into our hands. We want to fight. We want to stop certain things. We want to save our faith. We want to save our churches. We want to save our lives. We want to save our families. And so get up and fight. But how do we fight? And what do we fight? And where are we wasting our time? And where are we actually, in other words, what are we supposed to do? But what are we facing? And so there is, the Bible addresses a number of things, and those are things that we are going to run into, and they're going to frustrate us. But let me encourage you, don't let them frustrate you too much, because this is not our fight. This is a fight that started in the beginning and has only intensified and intensified and intensified, but it's going to come to a halt. And God will take back what is His, and He is going to condemn what opposes Him, and He will set everything right. And so it's a time where we need to trust God. But as we're speaking about authorities, about governments, about leadership, about people that we deal with, and like I said, not necessarily just in the end times, but more intensified more specifically as we're approaching the end times, in some things that we see very, very much taking place in the world right now. And so I have a number of things that we're facing. And so number one on that list is reprobates. The Bible uses the word reprobate a number of times, especially in the King James Version. Some other versions use the phrase debased mind. And so, and some of it even say disqualified. It's a word that is similar to one Jesus spoke in Matthew chapter number 5 about when the salt has lost its savor. And so when the salt has lost its savor, it ceases to be effective. It ceases to make, there's no connection, there's no more, almost becomes like sand. And that's why he said, you throw it to the ground and you stumble, it's useless for nothing. And when it talks about the word reprobate is a very similar word that what happens to the mind of a person. It becomes, in other words, it is unable to reason. It's debased, it is disqualified, and so that's what it can no longer connect to law, to fact, to truth, to reason. And so that's a reprobate mind. And so as we are approaching and fighting, and we know what happened in the last months, in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of these things happen, and people want to go and they just want to reason their viewpoints. Government, listen to us. This is the situation. This is the reason. But when we're dealing with a reprobate, there is no more reasoning. A reprobate cannot connect to reason. Reason that is based in law, in fact, in truth, in nature. He cannot connect. He's totally disconnected. And so that's why they teach in schools, if a child thinks that 2 + 2 = 5, then let him believe that, because there's no more base for reason. There's no more right and wrong. There's no more truth. There's no more fact. There's no more principle. There's no more order. Everything is just emotion. Everything is just passion. Everything is just lust. And so Romans 1:28 says, and since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, it didn't fit into their lifestyle, it didn't fit into their thinking, it didn't fit into their plans, they didn't see fit that they would even acknowledge God, says God gave them up. He didn't give them up as giving up their life, he gave up their minds, he withdrew his reason, his truth, his principles, his facts, his laws, his orders from their mind. It says he gave them up to a debased mind, or to a reprobate mind, to do what they ought not to be done. Or one translation says, the things that are inconvenient. Things that are not fitting to life. And so that's what they did. God gave them over, gave them up for this very thing. And so there's people with a debased mind or a reprobate mind. So to come to them with trying to reason, to them it's just simply foolishness. Because when we come from the foundation of fact, means nothing to them, because there's no more connection. Neither they cannot connect to that. And so when we're thinking about because reason and natural law, in fact, are all rooted in creation. God planted those things into creation. Truth is planted, rooted in creation. So when we look at creation, from with creation pops out truth, pops out fact, pops out natural law. And so, and this is why Romans 1 speaks about people that are forsaking the natural. They're forsaking natural law. They're forsaking natural facts. They're forsaking natural principles. And they're forsaking natural relationships. Because when we seek for something, we seek in one or three areas, or in all of three areas. Number one, we seek in the natural. If I seek a relationship, I seek amongst humanity a natural relationship that's natural. It's natural for a man to be with a woman. It's natural, and so we seek that in the natural world. But what happens when we seek that and we try to find fulfillment in it, satisfaction in it, and it doesn't satisfy us, it doesn't fulfill us, neither is it supposed to, because the one fulfills us is Jesus Christ. It is not nature, it's not natural relationship. And so we try the natural world in connection to the natural world. We try the natural things. Natural relationships, natural order, natural reason, which is good. It's a base for us to reason. And when we don't find what we're looking for, we are going to, often we go to the supernatural. And so the supernatural has a different base for reasoning than the natural. For an example, I can put a seed of corn into the ground and expect it to come out, a plant come out, within a number of days. That's natural. But if I put a seed in the ground and I expect the seed for it to grow within 24 hours, now I'm entering into a that's not natural, that's supernatural. That can happen. But the natural will not make that happen. It has to be supernaturally done. God is just as familiar, just as for Him, jumping from the natural to the supernatural, there's no difference other than how He connects with us. But to Him, one is not harder, one's not, to Him the supernatural world is only natural too. And so God can make anything happen. Nothing is too hard for the Lord. But sometimes we jump into the natural has failed us, and so we jump into a supernatural world. And so now we're trying to get supernatural. I don't want just a natural relationship. I want something supernatural. And so when we're looking in supernatural activity, and they're both in this world, out of the world. A lot of people they're fascinated with aliens. They're fascinated with activity in the sky. They're fascinated with all kinds of things that don't make natural sense because they're paying attention to the supernatural world. Not wrong necessarily. But if we do it at the expense of the natural world, then it is wrong. But the supernatural is not wrong. But when the natural, we cannot find what we're looking for, we often go to the supernatural and try to find there, and often fails us because the supernatural world satisfies no more than the natural world. It is God that satisfies. It's spiritual that satisfies us. It's a spiritual connection to the very person of God in a relationship, a supernatural or a spiritual relationship, John chapter number 3. But then once we fail in that area, there's another base for us to reason or to search, and that is the unnatural. Unnatural, and that's what Romans chapter number 1 goes, these people are going to the unnatural. Now, once we go into the unnatural area, we forsake natural relationships, we even forsake supernatural, we're going to an unnatural where a woman has a relationship, an intimate sexual relationship with another woman, and a man with a man, and we're forsaking completely, we're going to the unnatural, and that is completely contrary to God. And so that is once a person gives themselves to the unnatural. That's when God gives them over. He says, we have no more base for reason. That's unnatural. That's no longer has foundation. So people enter that, but there's a point where they choose that and say, we don't want to acknowledge God, and they go into an unnatural world. And so that's why they're not just in relationships, but that's where even 2 + 2 = 5, that's fine. It's not natural, but it's unnatural. And so they completely go into an unnatural world, unnatural reasoning. And so we cannot come to the people like that and try to have a natural reason, or even to bring God, because God has given them up from reason because they didn't acknowledge God. And so that's when they become reprobate. Once a person has rejected the natural and then the supernatural, he only has the unnatural, and that is the basis for reprobate. Jeremiah 6:30 says, "Reprobate silver shall man call them, because the Lord has rejected them." And so they're reprobate silver. There's no more natural things in it. It's reprobate. It is contrary. It's unnatural. It's opposes law, rule, order, truth, fact, principle, nature. And so 2 Timothy 3:8 says, just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so these men also opposed the truth, men corrupted in mind and disqualified regarding the faith. And that's exactly, they're disqualified, they're no longer. Because faith always starts with reason, God's faith. False faith always starts away from reason. And so, but God is the God. Come, let us reason together, God says. Come, let's get to the basis, let's get to the bottom of things, and you will see it my way. 2 Timothy 3:8, I already read by King James. It says, reprobate concerning the faith. And where it says, disqualified concerning the faith. Titus 1:16 says, they profess that they know God, but in works they deny him, being abominable and disobedient, and unto every good work reprobate. ESV says, they profess to know God, but they deny him in their works. They are detestable, disobedient, unfit for any good work. Now, why would these people, if they have no longer a connection to reason, to truth, and as we run into these people, and many of them are in government, many of them are in authority, many of them take leadership, and they really want to take over all leadership, all authority, all order, all control in the world, and they're doing more and more and more. And so we see more in governments, we see more in leadership. We even see a lot of it in churches, where people like this coming in, taking the leadership of churches. And so, but the question that we have, if these people no longer have a base for truth, for fact, for order, for law, for nature, why do they still have such a drive to be in position of leadership? What drives them? If their mind no longer connects to reason, what drives them? Well, one of the things is they have two areas, I should say maybe three areas, that are still moving within them. One of them is appetite. And we do have 7 natural appetites, and one of those appetites is an appetite for dominion. And so they still have that appetite for dominion. In fact, no longer reasoning that appetite actually takes over. And so there's such a hunger, such a craving, such an appetite for dominion. And so appetite, passion. We don't lose the passion, we lose the reason, but we don't lose the passion. And so they're very passionate about what they're doing. And then lust. The flesh the lust of the flesh is still there. And so that's why the sensuality and the sexuality and the immorality and all those things are driving, and the flesh still wants, and that passion that I want to have, I want to own, I want to be in control, I want to manipulate, I want to feel. That passion is still there. And so the appetite, the passion, and the lust is the driving motivation, driving forces that motivate. And so we don't lose those when we lose the reason and the mind. They become animal-like. And the Bible, of course, says the Antichrist is called the beast. A person with animal-like characteristics and instincts. A person with animal-like characteristics and instincts. And so we see the world going, and even in Canada they have schools where they have places that people can go to the bathroom if they feel like they're an animal. And there's more and more where people like, I'm not human, I'm an animal, and they start acting like animals. And a lot of people, their lifestyle very much become animal-like. Because there's no more reason, there's no more order, there's no more nature, no more natural things. And so they become animal-like. And so animals have passions, animals have the appetites, they have desires, but they have no reasoning. You can't reason with an animal. You can control them, you can manipulate them with their appetites. You can say, okay, you do the tricks and then I give you the meat, but they become animal-like, or these people become animal-like. Philippians 3:2 says, look out for the dogs. And he's not speaking about dogs as animals, but certain type of people, because they become animal-like. Look out for the evildoers. Look out for who mutilate the flesh. And that's exactly what the warning is. Matthew 7:6 says, do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before swine. Don't try to reason with animal-like people, with reprobates. And so so number one, we're dealing with reprobates. There's no reason. If you try to reason, you just look like a fool. You look like an idiot. You look like someone that doesn't have a purpose in life. And to them, the way we're going, it is just completely opposite to what nature and reason say. And so number one, reprobate. Number two, fools. And I'm not pointing out anyone, but I'm just talking about what we're going to run into as we're dealing with people, and especially a lot of people in charge, and more as we are getting towards the end time. These are people going to take the forefront. And so the difference between a fool and a reprobate is this. The fool is surrounded by evidence that contradict his opinions and actions, but he ignores them. He will not consider the evidence that he's surrounded with, nature, facts, rules, orders, laws, that contradict his opinions and actions. So he ignores them, what he's surrounded with, whether that's people or things or rules or whatever, he ignores them. The reprobate no longer has the ability to detect them, never mind understand them. And so reprobate, a fool still can reason. A fool still has the opportunity to connect to reason, but he ignores them. That's what makes him a fool, ignoring reasoning. And so, but the reprobate has been removed from God, has taken that away. Psalm 14 verse 1 says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, they do abominable deeds, there is none who does good. And the Lord looks down from heaven on the children of men to see if there is any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. Have they no knowledge? All the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord. There they are in a great terror, for God is with the generation of the righteous. And so God, in other words, the opportunity not to be a fool is God, coming to God. But those that reject God, says there is no God, they hid that way and go into foolishness. Proverbs 29:9 says, if a wise man has an argument with a fool, the fool only rages and laughs. So if you want to use reason, the very thing he ignores, he gets angry and he'll laugh at you. Psalm 92 verse 5 says, how great are your works, O Lord! Your thoughts are very deep. The stupid man cannot know, the fool cannot understand this. They don't understand the depths of God. They laugh at it, they get angry at it. It says that though the wicked sprout like grass and all evildoers flourish, they are doomed to destruction forever. But you, O Lord, are on high forever. Isaiah 32 verse 6 says, for the fool speaks folly, and his heart is busy with iniquity. They're given to iniquity, busy with iniquity, entangled, strapped, focused, to practice ungodliness, to utter error concerning the Lord, to leave the craving of the hungry unsatisfied, and to deprive the thirsty of drink. So it gives a list of things of what the fool does. For the fool speaks folly, he speaks foolishness. And it's interesting. Sometimes you see these people of influence say something, it's completely foolishness, but the world jumps at it. And says his heart is busy with iniquity. That's what his heart is, wrapped up, entangled with iniquity, to practice ungodliness, it says, to utter error concerning the Lord. And so he's busy trying to give the wrong information concerning God, to utter error concerning the Lord, to leave the craving of the hungry unsatisfied. He's busy with trying to get the craving of those that actually want unsatisfied. In other words, they're working, trying to make church so that you'll get nothing out of it. They're trying to make Christianity empty, and they're busy with that. And then it says, to deprive the thirsty of drink. They want to keep people from being satisfied because they want them to trust in them, control them, and they use those appetites, they use those longings, they use those cravings, and they want everything is opposed to God. And so we're dealing with the fool. And so reprobate fool cannot reason, the fool will not reason, the reprobate cannot reason. Number 3, what are we dealing with? Seared conscience. The conscience, and the word conscience is, I believe, 34 times in the New Testament. It's not in the Old Testament because the Old Testament lays the foundation for what the conscience is. But our mind is really divided into 2 areas. One is the conscience and the other one is the operating area. And so the conscience is where everything is rooted in, and the operating is where everything functions in. And so what happens is the conscience is very much, because guilt is something that's placed in the conscience. When a person feels guilty, it's his conscience that condemns him. And so when we're dealing with people, in 1 Timothy chapter 4 talks about, it says, now the Spirit speaketh, expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. And some will depart from the true faith, or the faith of the Lord, and they will depart from the faith they will devote themselves to deceitful spirits. Spirits that will trick, that will deceive, that will mislead, and teachings of demons. And so this is what and then listen to verse 2, it says, through the insincerity of liars, whose conscience are seared. I often say you can do two things with your conscience. You can clear it or you can sear it. When you clear it, you take all the guilt out of it. And that's what Jesus came. Read the book of Hebrews, especially from chapter 8 to chapter 10. And so that's what Jesus came. He could clear the conscience. By his blood, our conscience is cleared. We still have the awareness of sin, but we no longer have it rooted in our conscience. And so what people do is either clear the conscience by being saved, or they sear their conscience by making it callous. I think it's the book of Ezekiel talks about that they made their conscience or their minds callous, where it's no longer, it's like when we have callousness in the hands, I mean, you can poke it and you cannot feel it. And that's why the conscience no longer detects. One of the things in our conscience is how we feel about things. So I can sell you a car that is kind of, engine is short, but it sounds okay, and I sell it to you for a price where and I tell you it has a good engine, but it will bother my conscience. It will affect my conscience. Not you. You will just feel ripped off when you find out, but I have damaged my conscience. And so we're always supposed to keep a clear conscience. But by doing acts over and over and giving ourselves to sin and ignoring those things, we start searing our conscience where it no longer bothers us. And so reprobate cannot relate to law, but when we deal with a person that has a seared conscience, he does not feel bad about his actions. And sometimes we go to the government, we go to people in authority, we go to places where people are in charge that are reprobates or people with a seared conscience, and we try to make them feel bad for what they do to people. But let me tell you, you can tell them the most horrible stories of what's happening to humanity, and they will feel zero bad about it. It doesn't affect a person with a seared conscience. He no longer connects to feeling sorry, to feeling bad, to having compassion, to being merciful. That is gone. So there's no reasoning, there's no making him feel bad. And so sometimes that's what we want to do, because that's the basis we use, especially as God's people, or as people that are still have their reasoning intact. We want to use those things and we say, listen to me, look at it. Listen to me, listen to me. And they won't. Or see what you're doing. See what your ways are doing. See what your programs are doing. Seeing what your philosophy is doing. Seeing what your action is doing. Look at the people that are suffering. And it means absolutely nothing. Because of seared conscience. It doesn't detect. And so we're dealing with reprobates, we're dealing with fools, we're dealing with people with a seared conscience.